On today's episode, I talk to Dr. Sharon Bergquist. She's written a book called The Stress Paradox: Why You Need to Stress to Live Longer, Healthier, and Happier. I absolutely loved this conversation from this incredible human who's trained at Yale and Harvard. She's headed up numerous studies and really fascinated by longevity and aging and the importance of stress in that journey. And I loved it because we really talk about good stress and how the mind has so much to do with it. Like if we are worrying about our stressing, we're making it worse. But if we understand that stress is helping us to grow and build resilience, then it really directly affects our stress levels. So obviously that's oversimplified, and you'll need to listen to the whole interview to get the deeper insights into that. However, before I let you dive in, I want to let you know that she's a 3-5 emotional generator, the incarnation cross of Contanyan 2. So we actually had a conversation, I think it's after I pressed stop, about how she has this amazing energy to, pick up something that she thinks is fascinating or that she really loves and talk about it and spread the idea. It's that's what this cross is all about. So it was really cool to hear this generator be so lit up about a topic that really is influencing us at an individual level and a collective level so incredibly right now. If you're a geek like me and you really want to know, her core talent is the Gate 5, the shadow of impatience, the gift of patience, and the acidic state of timelessness. All right, I'll leave you with the rest of the interview. Hey, and welcome to today's episode. Well, on today's episode, I'm super excited to talk to someone who, I've got to be honest, in marketing, people are always talking about, you want to say something that gets people's backs up, or you want to, say the polarizing thing. And this woman is doing it without knowing she's doing it, or probably knows she's doing it, but in such a beautiful way. Welcome to the podcast, Sharon Bergquist.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm so excited to be here, and it's not intentionally trying to send a message that's provocative. It is simply following what our biology is telling us and communicating that. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
You're so welcome. And I think that this is the beautiful thing of it. Your book, The Stress Paradox, talks to, and I mean, look, years of research talks to really sort of saying, hang on, everybody, we have demonized this thing called stress without realizing that, like everything else, it is not black and white. It's a gray area. And when we start to understand the benefits of stress and how we can actually consciously choose between good stress and bad stress, that it's actually going to increase our longevity. So I love this conversation. I really think it's, again, it's very on point for the world that we're moving into, like getting out of this, as I said, black and white to this gray area, to really understand stress. So let's start at the beginning with really, I'd love to hear about your journey. I'd love to hear about this. I talk about, so many of us, most of us have this moment where we hit our dark night of the soul and we have this invitation into, all right, well, there's this journey, there's this hero's journey for you. And if you're brave enough, if you take this path, it's actually the thing that's going to mold you and grow you and evolve you into the person that you are today. So I'd really love to hear a bit about your journey from, that potentially your dark night of the soul to the version of Sharon that's sitting here with me today.
Yeah, as I began to write this book, it really brought together these breadcrumbs that I think were always there. And it was connecting all these points in a way that I'm surprised I didn't do at an earlier time, but it just all hit me. And it really goes back to very early in life. I grew up in a different country, and during a revolution, our family had to come here. And in that process, there's always so much change. There's culture change, language change. Life as you know it is uprooted, and there's such upheaval in such a short time frame. And I was always fascinated by what makes certain people in those circumstances want to push harder, to become more capable. And as I pursued my medical training and entered medicine, I had this outsider looking in perspective. I think that came from childhood. And about a decade into practicing healthcare in a way that I was very well trained to do, I think as most doctors are, I realized I wasn't making people healthier. I was treating disease. I was very competent at diagnosing disease, but not changing the trajectory. And having that outsider looking in perspective motivated me to say, how can I do better? How can I take what I understand about biophysics and biochemistry, which was my background in undergraduate school, take it with what I know about medicine and healing people? And that really is where the convergence happened. It was stress became the answer, it became the biggest levers that we can pull in our lifestyle in a way that completely transforms our body. And in that process, I really had to let go of what I had been preaching for a long time, which is what I think most people hear, which is stress always harm. So it was a lot of undoing, but it really all came together by the convergence of life experience and then medical experience.
Mm, I love it, isn't it? Like even just listening about, to your childhood and then having to change countries, like it was imprinted in you really early on. This idea of it's normal to get out of your comfort zone, to do something hard, and whether you're consciously aware of it or not, like it's that kind of initiator into something that's now helping the entire planet. So I love that. Awesome. So let's start at the beginning. I do want to talk about, I've got a personal experience going on with a friend of mine. So I do want to kind of come back to that. But let's kick off with this whole idea. And, to some listeners could be revolutionary idea that we actually have good stress and bad stress. It's not just all bad stress. So let's get a little bit of an understanding of that.
Yeah, so if we just first define the term stress, stress is anything that challenges us. It could be mental, it could be physical, it can be emotional. And what that stressor is doing is it's disrupting a natural balance we have in our body that we call homeostasis. The key is that how we build back after the stress is completely different depending on the type of stress. The stress that we're familiar with, which is usually this chronic, insidious stress from financial hardship, difficult relationships, even stress from constantly eating processed food and being sedentary. These are the stressors that after the experience, we are left more exhausted, fatigued, and ultimately more burnt out. Stressors that actually pay back with dividends are the ones that are good stressors. After the experience of that stress, we build back stronger. It creates anti fragility, which is far more powerful than resilience, right? So we think of, bouncing back from stress as the ideal, that we are in a more resilient state, but truly we can be better prepared to handle future stress when we deliberately choose stress, and good stressors are the way that we can do that.
I love this because it's really interesting because it really goes back to something that is intrinsically in me and always has been, just this understanding of like getting out of my comfort zone, like getting there because I know how good it feels on the other side. Yeah, and I feel like that's a really big part of it. Before we go there, okay, so the world we're living in right now, I feel like there's a lot of people that are being exposed to what I would call unresourceful stress, and that stress that leaves you exhausted and burnt out. Now, I know for me personally, I've been there, I've been burnt out. I definitely am not there now. But how do people start to identify? Yes, they're tired, but how do they start to identify, like, okay, this is working for me and this is not working for me from a stress perspective?
I think it really begins with awareness and tuning into your body and seeing the
Mm.
impact of any stress if you encounter a stress and you are not motivated, you're just completely fatigued, exhausted, and there's this internal resistance, then you know that this is the type of stress that is not serving you well.
Mm.
If you encounter a stress with excitement, with a sense of reward, and with this sense of possibility, those are the stressors that energize, and that starts to give you a sense of how to start making choices in your life. All too often, I think, can we bucket all stress as one thing? And it's so
Yeah.
critical to realize that when we stress in a way that's aligned, in a way that there's potential for reward, where it excites us, these stressors have a very different effect, really a completely divergent effect on our health than the stressors that really get us down and fatigued. And as you said, I think
Mm.
some of these are inevitable in such a big part of all of our lives. But one of the most counterintuitive things when we're stuck in that state of can't find my way out, life is so hard and stressful in a way that I wouldn't choose, is that we can use the good stressors to actually build our anti fragility state, our resilience to the stressors that we can't control.
Mm.
And that in itself can help us feel better, improve our mood, truly improve our health and longevity. And, as a physician and scientist, to me, that is the crux of what a lot of my work is around.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love this. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of like, oh my God, childbirth. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the
Yes.
ultimate stressor. And I remember before I had my first son, I read a book and the book just said, they gave me this golden advice. And it was the thing about childbirth is that most women fear the pain. But the moment you go, hey, my body knows what it's doing, it's good pain. This is good pain. Like I'm having a baby, this is good pain. Then all of a sudden, like, and I know like my first son was delivered at light speed, like it was, and I think that's such a great example. And I do want to kind of talk specifically to women because I want to talk about business. I want to talk about, menopause. I want to talk about all of these things because we juggle so many things. But I think like childbirth is the perfect metaphor because it's a good stress because at the end of it, you get this little human, and your body knows what it's doing. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key there is that when the hard comes before the reward is the compensation for the hard. And our bodies are wired in a way where that is a very powerful way to tap into the dopamine response. When we go for that reward, where we go for that big surge of dopamine without the heart. That's when our bodies go down this path of needing more to experience that same high, if you will. For
Mm.
example, when we get that dopamine surge, when we check our phones and get the messages, when we eat the junk food, the fat, sugar, and salt, they all release the dopamine, but it takes us down the path where our bodies then compensate by downregulating our dopamine receptors. We need more to get that same high. Whereas when we do the hard first, we actually get the dopamine surge in response, and we end up back at a state that doesn't downregulate the receptors. We don't get addicted in this spiral. So
Mm.
it's such a powerful way to experience that high, really the beauty and the wonder that we have in this world, but in a way that is aligned with our bodies naturally producing that state.
Mm. It's fascinating listening to you speak because I've just realized something about me. Like I will always go for the hardest thing first. So like if I'm in the gym, I'm going to do whatever exercise I don't like or I find the hardest. I'm always going to go for the biggest challenge first. And I think that's fascinating what you just said because that's absolutely right, And I know because once I've done the hardest thing, then the chemicals in my body are like, well, now you can do anything. So I just love hearing that. I think it's incredibly powerful. Um, I want to talk a little bit about. I've had a very close friend of mine have a very challenging diagnosis, and the truth is that she has been under a lot of, not good stress, unresourceful stress. And she's now dealing with a health outcome that's having a really big impact. And, she's got 2 young kids, she's got 2 businesses, she's got a partner, she's got a family. There's all of this stuff going on. And in my head, I'm like, right, this has definitely come from unresourceful stress. All of her friends and family are rallying around her. We're all doing a bunch of different things. How do we take the outcomes of too much bad stress and work with good stress to bring ourselves back into this homeostasis, back into health?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways that I think um, is a good starting point is simply rethinking about stress differently. And that is mindset. And that's oftentimes the first place to start. Simply just thinking that the stress can have a benefit, that the stress is preparing our body for something hard, that the stress is helping us focus, the stress is there to help us find meaning in what we went through. That simple frame, instead of that stress is hurting me and, stressing about stress, which is what I think we all
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
that simple shift changes how your body physiologically responds to the stress. And
Wow.
I can't state that enough because
Mm.
it's so powerful that our beliefs about stress can have more of an impact on us than the stress itself.
Mm.
And there've been studies that even look into this and bear this out, and people who are living under high stress but believe that that stress can lead to meaning and it can enhance our health actually can live longer. And people who think otherwise, that have high stress but think the stress is harmful, have a shorter lifespan, and it actually takes years away. So I think mindset is always such an important thing to check in on, because
Mm.
oftentimes we can't change the circumstance very quickly or very easily, but how we interpret it is something that we have agency over. And that mindset is really a secondary emotion. It's how we take these primary emotions like stress and anger and fear and how we interpret them. And that's the first place to start.
Mm, I love that. I love it because, I know for me personally in my journey, I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder in my late 20s. And, I literally rewired my brain. And ever since then, I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. You just, as long as you get this right and then you align the body or the design, or you align the subconscious mind to the design, it's incredible what we can, create and experience in our lives. Okay, so I would love to start to talk about, stress and business. A lot of the listeners are, these are people who, predominantly women who have kids. They are either, transitioning out of corporate, or they've got a side hustle, or they're getting their business off the ground. They want to have an impact, but they're juggling so many other things. And I think that sometimes, and I'm just hearing your words already, because I'm like, I think sometimes when we're in this place and we're in those early stages or those foundational stages, and it does feel like hustle, it does feel like, okay, I do have to get outside of my comfort zone. But this whole idea that, okay, this stress is actually working for us. The fact that we've chosen to do something that feels like, our purpose, that we're going to have an impact, that we're serving the planet. Let's start to talk about stress and, following what lights you up, or following your true alignment with your design. Because I think, I know for me, there was a little bit of a time in my business, because I burnt out in my advertising career. I burnt out as an entrepreneur. Then I even burnt out because I loved it so much, I just did too much of it. So I kind of got to this point that I'm like, okay, I've tried all the ways. And I'm actually a 3-5 profile, just like you. So there's a lot of trial and error in my life. There's a lot of experimentation and working out what works. But let's start to talk about, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm building a business. I'm working towards this future identity. Right now, it feels like a lot. How can I actually work with my stress so that I can increase success, longevity, move closer to flow? and let go of the fear stress?
Good stress is really defined by being the right kind at the right dose for the right duration, followed by recovery. And we can apply those principles when it comes to how to structure a business and take yourself down a path where you're growing as the business is growing. And so the first component of that is the right kind. And this is such a critical piece of what makes stress good, because the right kind is one that aligns with your belief system. It brings together what you do in this world with who you are in this world. And it is purposeful. It takes you in a direction where what you are doing has meaning to you. It helps you live out your values and it contributes to a greater good. When we choose stressors that are of that kind, they buffer the response that we have to stress. The cortisol surge actually gets mitigated because we are releasing hormones that are protective. Hormones like dopamine, like oxytocin, that actually reduce the reactivity of cortisol. What's fascinating is a study just came out last month in the journal Health Psychology that looked at cumulative life stress. So all the stressors from childhood, financial stress, marital conflict, every type of stress cumulatively, and found that stress alone does not correlate with our rate of aging.
Wow.
Purpose is what matters.
Oh, I love this.
It was so profound that people who had purpose were buffered by the impact of cumulative life stress. But stress without purpose is what accelerated aging. So the key is really first and foremost, it's not to avoid hard, not to avoid, pushing yourself, going past your comfort zone, pushing past that resistance. It's first figuring out, what do you want to do it for, right? You're stressing for purpose. And if you can get that piece and then push in the pursuit of reaching that higher good and that purpose that you're living out, then you can have permission to really stress yourself as much as you need. But that's really the key. So what I always encourage people is really kind of 3 steps, and to do it in an iterative loop. To first, really, number 1, reflect. So reflect on, what are your values? And it's a very hard thing to do. It always sounds easier than it is, but take time to reflect. And number 2 is to feel. And this is so critical. Oftentimes when we transgress what our values are, we feel it in our soul. We feel it in our gut. And tuning in to, why are you feeling that resistance, or why are you so excited? But just feeling it is such a critical part. And number 3 is just act. Take small steps. Start with low stakes, but do it, and you build self-trust. Every time you do, you build self-confidence, and you take these small steps. So you define your values, you feel the difference between when you're pursuing something that feels right deep down inside at the level of just your deepest and most innermost feeling. And then you keep taking these small steps. And every time you do, the beautiful part is that we know you are recalibrating your brain. You are building pathways between neurons, which are our brain cells, that help the connectivity. We start to build back after the stress in a way where we remember how we handled the stress. We become better prepared for future stress, and we become more capable of handling more stress. And we do this in a very iterative way. So I think of it as stress, recover, repeat, stress, recover, repeat, until we become the person we want to be, and until we have a business with a background foundation that is sustainable, right? We are building a thriving business, not at the expense of taking away from our health and taking away from our longevity, but building it at the same time.
And that word sustainable, I'm going to come back to that. You know, just the hearing you speak, I had this epiphany of all the years that I was experiencing depression and panic disorder. I have forever been so incredibly grateful to my body because I'm like, God, all that stress, all of that, and how well my body came through it. I had babies at that time, but, fell pregnant easily and had really good pregnancies. And my babies were healthy. And so I was very like, I'm so grateful. And the moment you just said that, I'm like, oh my God, because I remember having as they say, a come to Jesus moment in my mental health journey where I'm on my knees screaming at the sky, like, this is not me. What the hell is this all about? I want to change it. I want to get better, all about my mental health. And I just heard this very clear, this is not just about you, Emma. And in that moment, I realized, oh my God, do you mean I need to heal me so I can help others heal? And from that point on, I'm like, okay, right, this is bigger than me. And that's when everything started to get better. Not quickly, but it did. It got better because I had this bigger mission. I had this mission something bigger than me told me that it's not just about me. So I think that's what probably helped my body be more resilient over time because there was so much, and everything I do, there's so much meaning and purpose behind it.
And that is such a beautiful part about doing this work. I think of incorporating good stress and building anti fragility as creating this beautiful, positive, virtuous cycle in one's life. When we do this work, we create an internal state that's very synchronous, it's very coherent, and we emit a different energy than when our body feels discord. And that energy that we emit is one that inspires creativity instead of fear. It creates cohesion instead of discord. It invites opportunity. It lifts the people around us up. And what's really profound to me is our sphere of influence. There's work by James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis looking at nodes showing that happiness travels 3 degrees of separation, meaning that my state can not only impact my friends, but my friends' friends. I think we underestimate how much we influence, and it's influenced not by the spoken word, but by our internal state. So doing this work, which is hard work, not only pays off for ourselves, but we're really doing it to be a positive force in the life of people around us and to lift others up with us.
It's interesting hearing you speak because it sounds like alignment. Do you know what I mean? Like it sounds like everything that I'm talking about with human design. And what's really fascinating, in fact, I'm going to look at your chart while I'm here because I've got a couple of gates that are specifically challenging. And I also think that they're gates that have really helped me be a person that others are like, you get me. I'm like, yeah, I get you because I've had, significant challenge. And it's interesting because you have the gate of conflict as well, which is the gate 6. And this is one that starts like in the shadow, it starts as conflict, but actually then it becomes diplomacy and then it becomes peace as it moves higher towards enlightenment. And I think that when I first came to human design, I didn't want to hear that I was a line 3. What do you mean I'm going to keep falling down and getting back up again? And, I didn't want to hear like I have the gate of crisis and the gate of conflict and all of these things. But the thing that I've come to learn is that they are actually the things that make me, not only do I feel fulfillment on the inside when I've learned to transcend the fear states of these energies, but they're also the other things that attract people to me because I feel like they get me. So I don't know. I feel like I've definitely, my whole journey with stress, I've really, without realizing it unconsciously, I've been the one that steps out of my comfort zone, and I know that when I get out of there and I, I'm going to call it a win, but it's more of a learn. It could be either. That's actually the thing that magnetizes people back to me.
Yeah. And it is truly the way we were meant to live. A lot of the work around good stress, especially the biological stress, is looking at how the stress impacts the way we express our genes. And we are designed for hard. We are designed to push through the resistance. That is what signals our body to turn on our hardwiring for health. We begin to repair, heal, and regenerate our bodies when we push to that point where we signal that times are hard. Our cells literally switch to a stress resistant state where we start to do house cleaning, kind of put our affairs in order so that when we recover, we can reconfigure to a way that is building resilience, not just in a subjective way, but in a very tangible, objective way where the very structures and the very function of our bodies actually changing. So we are truly designed for hard to be the best versions of ourselves.
Mm.
And one way I think of it is if we just flip it the other way, like what happens when we aren't in synchrony, when we aren't in alignment. And to me, that is probably one of the biggest hidden sources of chronic stress that I think gets completely discounted. When we are not in synchrony, our body perceives that we are lying to ourselves, which
Wow.
is profound, right? We would never lie to other people. Yet we, at a very subconscious level, are lying to ourselves when we are constantly pleasing others, when we are fulfilling things that we feel we should, that transgress what our true desires are. We are creating a state where our body thinks that we are lying. And that creates inflammation. That is what can increase the risk of disease, shorten our lifespan. That is part of the reason the body breaks down when we're under so much stress. So
Wow.
that alignment is so critical. Again, that is really the starting point to ask oneself, am I stressing in a way that serves me and serves that greater good? Or am I creating internal stress that I'm not even realizing that is creating that harmful state where I'm getting sicker?
And you know what's fascinating about this is I think about, my community or the people, that ask me questions and they're like, "Oh, I can't do this because of that." And you just hear the stories and the excuses. And if this isn't the best piece of evidence to why you should just jump out of your comfort zone instead of continuing to tell yourself some BS story about how you're afraid to be seen or you're afraid to be rejected or you're afraid to be, fill in whatever your fear is. Because ultimately the body thinks that you're lying. The subconscious mind thinks you're lying. And I think that is gold, because at the end of the day, everything that I'm saying is like, you want to understand the difference between being out of alignment and being out of your comfort zone. And because being out of our comfort zone is this place where the magic happens. And to hear you say this, that actually, if you are playing it safe, if you are continuing, I had someone say just the other day, I'm afraid to be seen. And I'm known for being pretty direct. I think people say I give people a loving kick in the pants. And I just said to her, I'm like, I don't care. That's irrelevant. Everyone goes through that at some point. You just have to step out. You just have to step out. You don't have to get onto a stage with tens of thousands of people. Just speak to someone, get out of your comfort zone. And I just love hearing this, that when we play it safe and tell ourselves, well, I should this and I should that, and I need to be this person because my whoever needs me to do this, or that's actually creating bad stress in our body. So it's actually so much better for us just to be like, I just know this is the right thing to do. It scares the hell out of me, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Because that way, not only are we aligning to our purpose, not only are we building our muscle to serve, but we're actually building longevity. Are you looking to build a successful human design or astrology business? Do you wish that you had your own chart tool on your website so you don't have to send people somewhere else to get it? Bodygraph.com provides all the resources you need to turn this vision into a reality. We use this incredible software in our business to provide charts and custom reading reports at the click of a button, generate leads, and bring in lots of passive revenue. Bodygraph.com has already helped coaches and entrepreneurs generate over $2.5 million in revenue. If you're ready to take your business seriously, start with a free trial and use the code Human Design Podcast to get 30% off for 6 months. Here's what you can do with Bodygraph.com. Embed stunning charts directly into your website, build personalized lead magnets to grow your email list, create and sell detailed reading reports, and even use their free website builder to get started fast. Bodygraph.com is the ultimate all-in-one platform for building your human design or astrology business. If you're ready to join the community of successful entrepreneurs, visit bodygraph.com and start building your dream business today. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code Human Design Podcast to get 30% off for 6 months.
And this is such a critical and counterintuitive thing, because I think, along with a lot of the encouragement towards wellness, has been this notion that we need to, quote, be kind to ourselves. And in the short term, that may serve us well, but pushing hard is really playing the long game. It's really what we seek, that healthier state, the longevity, the joy, the happiness lies on the other side of pushing hard. And to me, that is being kind to ourselves if we're playing the long game.
And I think this is really interesting. Again, it's that being out of alignment versus being out of your comfort zone, because I know for me personally, there are sometimes things that I don't want to do, but I just do them anyway. And it's like what I get on the other side of it. But I want to share actually an example of the opposite. So I'm known for building a business. Like I work when I want, how I want. I've built this whole business on my own terms. It's taken a while. I've made a lot of mistakes. But even the beginning of this year, I said to Taylor that works with me, I'm like, I'm bored. Like I've made my business so low touch that I'm bored. And like it actually got to a point that I'm like, okay, right. And I had a lot of other things going on, so it was perfect timing. But it actually, in the last number of months, I'm like, right, back in there, out of my comfort zone, doing things that I'm really lit up by, but potentially scared of, because like that doesn't feel good. And I think that this piece that, out there in the marketing right now, we're talking about everyone talking about their soft girl era. And I'm like, the moment I get too soft or too nice or too putting my feet up, I actually feel like I'm disconnected, like I've unplugged from my purpose. I've unplugged from a mission, something bigger than me. So, because I've always got something that's like, is it even possible? Like, can I even do that? So yeah, I think this is a really, really important conversation for this time, because so many people have burnt out in an unresourcefully, pursuing stress that doesn't serve them. And they're putting all of this into one bucket instead of going, okay, so I burnt out because I wasn't listening to my heart. I wasn't listening to my soul. I wasn't engaged in my purpose. However, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still want to feel stretched. We want to feel inspired. We want to feel like, can I really do this? I don't know, but I'm going to give it a red hot go.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I think because a lot of people are at the end of the spectrum where they're experiencing overwhelm, the logical thing to then assume is that the less stress, the better. But our bodies just don't work that way. When we go to the other end of the extreme, not enough stress, we actually weaken ourselves. Our bodies work in a very use it or lose it capacity. We call it bioplasticity. And at any given point, our bodies are constantly changing. Our thoughts, behaviors, our beliefs, these are all different ways we stress ourselves. They lead to different states. And when we aren't getting enough stress, we are becoming weaker. We are increasing our fragility. So just as we need this sweet spot amount of stress, which is this kind of mild to moderate amount, if we don't get that, we don't get the stimulus for growth. We don't get the stimulus that turns on our body's natural ability to heal, to regenerate, to keep us hardwired for health, which is ultimately what we are hardwired to do. We oftentimes, though, just don't give our bodies the stimulus to turn on the miraculous capability that we have. So in the world of stress, we actually have a construct now of, we know too much stress is being harmful. We call it distress. Good stress is eustress. And there's a term called sus-stress, which is inadequate stress. And I think we need to course correct, because I think the pendulum is swinging such that people are trying so hard to recover from burnout, to reduce stress as much as possible, that we discount the harm that can happen at the other end of the spectrum, and that we lose our natural mechanism for growth and healing when we get to that part.
I think this is so fascinating. And I think that, because as you said, it's so counterintuitive. If you find yourself in a place that, um, stress has got you here, you don't want to do more of that to get more of those results. But what I love that I'm hearing is, it's like, no, you just have to make sure that the body still can grow. Growth is the important thing, and growth comes from being uncomfortable. It doesn't mean stressing ourselves out. I love that word sustainable. I love this word, because I think this is where a lot of people fall down, because, it's either a business or a lifestyle. And I do want to talk about recovery, and I want to talk about, stress from the wellness industry's kind of perspective. But I think sustainable is such an important word, because, I've done it a million times. Like, I start hard and fast. I overcommit. I say, I'm going to do it every day. And it's not sustainable. And I think something that is always such a great indicator of any practice, routine, anything that we're introducing, is really this ability to sustain whatever that commitment is. And I think that, like, through this frame of good stress, I kind of want to just kind of dive into this wellness industry approach. Now, I love a bit of biohacking. I'm very into all of the longevity things. However, there is a part of me that's like, my God, how do these guys have all the time to do these things? Like, I've got children to raise. I'm running my business over here. I'm like, taking care of my friends. I'm travel. I've got all this other stuff going on. How the hell am I in a sauna every day or a cold plunge every day? So I'd really love your opinion on, okay, I get that all works for men, but can we talk about women that really are juggling a bunch of different things? I'd love to be in a sauna twice a week. We have a cold plunge, but actually, to be honest, haven't used it for a while. But can we actually talk about let's talk about recovery, but let's talk about, okay, if we're going to bring good stress in as women that already have stresses in our life, how do we approach that?
Yeah. So there are two parts to that. I'll first talk about the recovery, because that ties into how do we make stress and using what we're terming stress accessible to everybody. And I have to say that I'm such a believer that any intervention, anything that we do for wellness, for our health, has to be something that's practical, something that's accessible to everybody. Because, like you, I work full time, I have kids, and most of my patients are in the same situation. So to me, it's not a solution if it's not applicable to the people that I take care of, and if it's not applicable to my own life. So there are two parts to this. One is this recovery piece. And the key is that every time we go through a stressor, that the duration is such that there's recovery following it. So good stress is generally short in duration. It's episodic. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's followed by strategic recovery. And this is the part that I think that a lot of people don't do a good job of. I think we're pretty good at stressing ourselves. We're not as good as planning for recovery, and then also thinking strategically about what that recovery should be. For example, if you go through a challenging deadline for work, for example, that following that, you give your body time to not just recover in the sense of doing something relaxing. Oftentimes we'll read a book, lay on a sofa, watch a movie, hang out with friends. That's good to relax, but it doesn't give you the depth of recovery, the ability to actually build neuroplasticity as when you turn off your busy mind. And that's such a critical part of getting the most out of the recovery, which means you're getting the most out of the stress, because it's in the recovery that we're building the pathways in our brain that help us remember how we handled the stress.
Yeah.
So if we do repeat episodes of the stress without the recovery, you're really just stacking the stress, and you're going to find yourself in that situation of chronic stress and burnout. So this recovery part is just as important as the alignment and how to properly stress yourself. So you want to do things for strategic recovery, like going out in nature. A lot of times how we align with that natural rhythm of our natural world helps us get to this state where we upregulate our parasympathetic nervous system, and our bodies completely can shut off our minds, and we can build those pathways. So that is actually my personal favorite way, is just to get out in nature and kind of disconnect with the world, but connect with the natural world. And in terms of making this a practical, accessible part of everyday life, the key to good stress is that it's mild to moderate. We think of stress or doing things that are hard as being something that's seismic, like I've got to go climb a mountain,
Yeah.
because that's hard.
I definitely fall into that category, like overcommitting.
Yeah, but that's where we push that stressor to the overwhelm range. What we're talking about is, if you are exercising, just push to the point where there's some intensity. For example, if you like to walk, do it in a way at least once a week where you're doing 5 minutes of super fast walk, really pushing yourself to breathe harder, and you feel your heart rate going up, and then back off for 5 minutes, catch your breath a little bit, do that again instead of just staying at that continuous pace. But you just want to stress your system. If you are trying to eat in a pattern that can stress your body from what I term fasting, but it's really normal eating. Essentially, you just want to go 12 hours without eating, because that's what pushes your body to this metabolic switch where instead of burning sugar, you're burning fat for energy. And that creates the ketones that signal our body that we are in a stress state. And that's enough to upregulate all of these healing and regenerative abilities. So simply ending eating at dinner and trying to eat 2 to 3 hours before bed to create that 12 hours is enough to stress your body to this healing ability. Running up a flight of stairs, just turning the shower on to cold at the end for 30 seconds. There are so many simple, everyday things that we can do. And again, these are the things that have the maximal impact with the shortest amount of time investment. These are the biggest levers because they work with the rhythm of our body. They work in alignment with our body's need to just be pushed a little bit past our comfort zone, but not to that point of overwhelm, followed by recovery. And it's the repeat pattern of doing this that makes us stronger, that makes us healthier, and ultimately makes us happier.
I love that. And I heard you say on another podcast, and I thought this was fascinating, that we can tell when we've gone too far. And And the example that I felt when I was listening to this conversation was on the Commune podcast. And I have this in a sauna. So I will I don't love a sauna, but I love it for its benefits. And I'm uncomfortable most of the time. But sometimes I get to this point where it feels really uncomfortable. And I used to force myself to stay in the sauna, but over the last few years, I'm like, you know what? Screw that. I'm going out for 30 seconds and then I'll go back in again. And the same thing happened with ice baths. So I would do them at like 2 degrees. And I'm like, I just feel like there's something not right about this. And then all the research started to come out that women should be, that it should be, I think our ice bath now is at 12 degrees. And I could just tell, like, yes, it's uncomfortable. It's not like I just want to sit here all day, but I can tell in my body that my body's saying this is the right amount of hard versus I think so many of us force ourselves to do the thing that everyone else is telling us we should do, and we're overriding our own internal guidance system.
You're spot on. Feeling that point of discomfort is so individual. There is no temperature that's the right temperature for an ice bath. There's no temperature that's the right temperature for sauna. It's what is right for you. And there's so much variability from person to person, and we have to honor that difference. And truly, even for the same person, it's going to be different day to day, depending on how well we've recovered. So our goal is just to push a little bit past that comfort zone and then follow it by recovery. And that can be for one person just walking to a mailbox. For a trained athlete, it could be, doing sprints and intervals. So it's so different, but this is for all of us. And the truth is that the people for whom this is going to be the hardest are the people who need this the most.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it also really confirms for me something that I've been in the gym, I don't know, since school. Like I've always gone to the gym in some capacity. And I've done a lot of sport. I'm very active. I walk a lot. I swim a lot. I ride. I've got a dressage horse. Like I'm a very active person. And I remember saying to someone not long ago, I'm like, because I actually have this, there's this piece in me that when I'm in the gym or when I'm in a class, I just know that's my limit. And for years, I have thought that that's me quitting or giving up or whatever. And then more recently, I realized I'm the only person I know that hasn't had an injury from the gym. Like I'm 50. Like I don't have injuries. I don't have sore joints. I don't have any of those things. And it just makes me think, like, I think that's the same thing. I think I have just a really good internal barometer that I know how far to push and when not to keep pushing. And like hearing you, I'm like, wow, I just got to not be on my case. I got to stop criticizing myself because I've already got the results, It's like when people say, oh my God, I went to the gym and I can't move today. I'm like, I don't get that, like my body recovers really, really well. I'll take magnesium, I'll do all the things, but it's very rare that I actually feel anything other than a slight awareness of muscle pain, and it's beautiful just to hear this because I'm like, wow, for the years I've been on my own case that I don't push myself hard enough, where really the results are telling me I've pushed myself exactly enough.
Yeah, and the scientific basis for that, because I'm a nerd, is
I love
that
nerds.
anytime we encounter a stress, there's a limit to how much growth we can experience. So the human body can grow 20 to 25% after any stressor. If we push ourselves to an extreme, that doesn't lead to more growth. It just leads to, in the case of being at the gym, to overtraining, and that leads to injury. In the case of mental or emotional stress, it just leads to burnout. So I think we have to honor this. And the reason for that is as our bodies try to reestablish that internal balance that we call homeostasis, that process already costs our body a certain amount of energy and effort. So the amount that we can really dedicate to growth is after our body gets to that balanced state again, because that's how the body survives. However, when we stress, recover, repeat over time, that consistency can lead to 60 to 90% of increasing our human potential.
Wow.
So you're far better off going to the gym consistently and just listening to your body when you're like, okay, I pushed. Now I'm going to grow and experience the benefits of that pushing, and doing that consistently. Then you are going all out, really trying to do this feat that you're trying to prove to yourself, injuring yourself, and then you're done.
Yeah.
So I think you're spot on. I think your intuition has kind of led you to how to maximize your ability to grow. And in the case of working out, you're growing strength. In the case of using your mental capacity, you're growing possibility, you're growing capability. In the case of your eating pattern, you're growing your body's metabolism. So however we do it, it's all about pushing and growing, but doing it in a mild to moderate way, brief, intermittent, followed by recovery. And that's the pattern of good stress.
Mm. And I have to let you go, but I have to ask about this recovery piece. And, you talked about the mind, the busy mind. So is recovery from stress, like, is it important? I mean, I meditate, I'm obsessed with heart coherence and heart math. I go to tea ceremony, which basically means you sit in silence for an hour each day. Um, how important is it that we find like mental, I want to say stillness, but I know not all people are going to have total stillness, but that calm mind for recovery?
I think the calm mind is critical, but it doesn't have to be in the setting of stillness. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of overlap between recovery practices and a lot of the mind body practices. But this is a little different in that you can get to that state by doing something again that's active. You can go hiking, and you are still disconnecting the mind. And
Mm.
I think for people who just feel that they aren't predisposed to enjoying that stillness, or it just doesn't work for them, it's an alternative. So I think stillness, mind body practices, meditation are one way, but not the only way to get to that state.
I love that. I think it's really important, especially through the frame of human design. Those of us that, not me, but people have a defined ajna, like it seems that energy is consistent, like it's on all the time. So it's like, um, it's like telling a fish to walk on land. When you say have a silent mind, it's not going to happen. So it's like, how are the other ways that you can feel that calm and that stillness in the mind, body, and spirit? So I love that. So before I let you go, is there something that we haven't covered yet that you think is really important for my audience to hear?
I think that one of the other really important parts of this is that every time we push our bodies in a way where we're episodically experiencing stress, we are recovering at a set point where we are calmer and we have less stress reactivity. So sometimes people think, for example, that if I do a high intensity interval workout where I'm pushing to these spikes of cortisol, that that is potentially a harmful thing to do. But what really matters is, what is your baseline state and what is it doing to you? Kind of again in this long game way of thinking of things. And after the workout, your cortisol level is going to be lower than your baseline of where you started before the high intensity workout. Our bodies are designed for these episodic spikes to get us to this healthier state. So do not fear these transient spikes. We're looking at what's your cumulative cortisol level.
Mm.
What is the exposure that your body's experiencing over time? And to not be deterred, because there's so much talk about cortisol being harmful. And in reality, it's just your body responding to prepare you for something that's challenging. And that can be a very normal response. So we just simply don't need to have that fear. And I think when we differentiate good stress from bad stress is bold. Good stress is unapologetic. Good stress is transformative. And I think we have to give ourselves permission to be stressed when we are doing it in a way that can lead to that purposeful growth.
I love that. And again, I'm reminded of childbirth, like I think that we live in a time where we've been taught to fear our own bodies and doubt the capacity of what and the capability of what our bodies are designed to do. And again, childbirth, like literally, this is one of the hardest things that you will do as a woman. And yet, the body's like, I'm sweet. Don't worry about it. I'm good. Like I'm designed for this.
Yeah.
And I think that this is, what you're saying and what I'm hearing is that this is what we're designed for. We're designed to live, to expand, to grow. And the other thing that just talking to you has really helped me understand is like, once more, like getting out of this conventional way of, like all the and again, I love it, but all the biohackers, all the longevity people, all the da 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 da, like let's get back to life and living a life. And if we're connected to our heart and our purpose, and we get out of our comfort zone because our higher self is saying you need to, that's your thing, go chase it, and understanding that it's a cycle. So like push, grow, evolve, get to the other side, recover, then repeat. Like just, it's a cycle. It's making sure that that cycle is always moving and that you're not trapped in one part of the cycle, because that's when I think I'm hearing that's when it becomes unresourceful.
Yeah, 100%.
I love it. So, oh my God, I could talk to you all day. But Sharon, where can people find your work, and maybe on social media, and how to, get more Dr. Sharon Bergquist in their life?
People who are interested in this idea of good stress and how to apply it to their life in a very practical way, the book, The Stress Paradox, can really help guide. I've created protocols that really break this down in a way I do with my patients to make it applicable to everyday life. You can also find me on my website, drsharonbergquist.com. I'm on Instagram as the Good Stress Doctor and on LinkedIn as Dr. Sharon Haresh Bergquist.
Oh my God, I love it. And I'm just sitting here, the way you just talked about your book, I'm like, of course it will be practical and it will be easy to follow and simple. Like I'm just looking at your human design because you're a 3-5, so same as me. And we have people are drawn to us because we can make things really practical from the line 5, but we're giving our lived experience from the line 3. You also have the gate 43, which is all about simplifying. But the other last human design thing I just want to geek out on is you are actually the incarnation cross. Your incarnation cross is the cross of Companion. And what you're here to do, so a large part of your purpose is you're here to get people excited about something. And this is it, like the stress paradox, so that they share it with other people. And I'm sitting here just geeking out. I'm like, I'm so excited about this. I'm telling everyone literally here on the podcast, but I'm also about to meet with this friend of mine. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get the book. I've got to tell her all the stuff. I've got to tell everybody. So I just love that, we're just sitting here learning so much about stress and how it can be good for us, and just watching you express your human design in alignment. I love it.
Amazing, Emma. And I'm listening to you break down my human design, and you're spot on.
I love it. It's so good. Well, once more, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I trust you got what you needed from today's episode, and I look forward to having you on the next one. Bye for now.